This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam, with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
Yeah, and I was, like you, I was looking for happiness and peace in the liquor bottle, doing lots of things that just were not giving me happiness. Yeah, and like I said before, since becoming a Muslim, my life has improved 150%. Sorry. I said, God, I am completely lost, completely alone. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really going down a bad street. I need your help. Please help me. You know, with the Christian Trinity and with Jesus being divine, there's really no way that you can logically prove these things. That's why it's called the mystery of faith. It boils down to being the mystery of faith. I know there are a lot of people who, with a lot of great intentions, who try to prove theologically that they make their cases, but it always ends up boiling down to a leap of faith. The Imam said something to me that we still talk about to this day. And he said, you know enough about Jesus, now you need to learn about Muhammad. I was listening to the podcast, believe it or not. But I just stopped and I took out my earphones and I said, God, if I'm to become a Muslim, I need a sign. I said, I need you to show me and talk to me and tell me that this is right. And I was looking up in the sun and I just felt a peace come over me, a real peace. And I felt so good. As you are now, so I once was. As I am now, so you can and shall be. Listen to your heart. Listen to the truth. Find authentic sources and follow your heart and allow God to guide you. And if you openly and sincerely make a prayer for his guidance, God will guide you. And don't be scared. Allow this to happen, because in the end, I gotta tell you, I am so much happier now. My life is so much improved.
Welcome to the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com. This is the place where you can get all your information about the topic of converting to Islam. Today we have a special guest. His name is Grant Miller, also known as Abdur Rahim. He's 59 years old. He's a new revert, converted about 11 months ago. After about 2 years of study. He was born in Pittsburgh, grew up in Los Angeles, and currently lives in South Carolina. He's got a Catholic background. He was a Eucharistic minister and a member of the Knights of Columbus. He's got a background in information technology, and he's a contributing author and technical editor, textbooks about Windows server technology. And he's also written a number of books on martial arts history. So welcome to the show, Grant.
Assalamu alaikum. Well, thank you for having me. It's very good to be here.
Yeah, peace be upon you too, Grant. Thanks for that. This is going to be an interesting interview. And also the thing which makes me happy is that our podcast here actually helped you to take your first steps to convert to Islam.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And in fact, as I was doing my initial investigations into Islam, your podcast was one of my go-tos. I listened to it a number of times during the week, and they were very helpful indeed, in helping guide me along on my way.
Can you remember some of the episodes which you liked the best?
A number of them were very good. That I enjoyed. The The one that I think I remember the most was a podcast where you interviewed a former U.S. military man. I think it was one of the first podcasts, and his experience with the religion of finding the misinformation that he was given and finding the truth. I was very similar to what I experienced. His experiences with meeting people and the warmth that he felt on reception. Also, I was experiencing, and so I felt really attached to that one. Another podcast, and of course they were all very good. Another one was with a former rapper who was in Texas, and he especially resonated with me because he also was in foster families when he grew up, and he accepted Islam at a much earlier, like 19 or something, was younger age when he accepted Islam. But he also resonated with me. I felt real kinship with him, and so but there was just a number, and all of the hosts have been just great and enjoyed. I still listen to this day.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that, that the podcast's getting out there and benefiting the people. So you mentioned you're a Eucharistic minister. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What does that mean?
Sure. So I grew up in the Catholic tradition, and when there's a number of ways that you can contribute to the church. Some people are cantors, they sing. Some are lectors, they read. Some are Eucharistic ministers, which are the people who take the Eucharist, which is the literal body and body of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, the literal body, and you take it out to people who are shut in or cannot, or in a hospital, or somehow immobilized, and we would take that out and distribute the Eucharist to them. So I was part of that ministry. I was also in the Knights of Columbus, which is a organization that does charity work. So they help the church. They also go out and help a lot of different organizations. They provide charity services, etc. So I was quite involved with the church. I was also a musician. I played not only at Mass, but also played in the Catholic high school musicals that they have. So I was quite involved in my time with the church.
Okay, so we'll have more questions about the church later on. Now okay. I just want to talk to you about how you feel right now about Islam. It's been 11 months. Can you tell us how you feel with Islam and what it's like to be a Muslim? Sure.
Well, I have to say, and we'll probably get to this in a little bit, but my life has improved 150% since I took my Shahada and became a Muslim. God has directed me on this path, and my life has improved. Reading the Quran, listening to the Quran, following the Hadith and the Sunnah of our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And there's a great deal of truth that I am able to rely upon with full confidence, and it's all validated. It's logical. It's simple. You have scientific proofs. You have, the hadith are rigorously scrutinized so that you know what you're hearing. If it comes from the valid sources, that it's real, that it's true. There's no man interjected. There's no attempts of harmonization. It's there, and it's. And the real blessing for me is that it wasn't, I wasn't felt pushed into it. It just slowly grew on me. And the more I learned, the more I investigated, the stronger my faith, the stronger my convictions became. And like I said, my life has improved 150% since accepting Islam.
That's great. I like how you say that the religion wasn't pushed onto you and that it grew on you. So let's go now back to the time when you first thought about becoming Muslim, and we'll go through it chronologically. So back in the day, what were your first impressions of Islam growing up?
So I'm embarrassed to say, for 55 years of my life, I knew nothing outside of what I was given. I knew nothing of the religion, of the faith, of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, other than misinformation. And it wasn't that I was exposed to a number of, and I was very interested in religion. When I was in college, I studied Protestantism. One of my foster families was Buddhist, and so I was experienced with Buddhism. When I studied in Japan, I studied in China, and I actually took a class on Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and so I knew these religions, and so but I was never exposed to Islam, and that. But I will say that as I reflect back on my life, I do see how God started to put things into play that would eventually lead me to Islam. One, and I think the most important one, was that I had a priest early in my life who told me to always put God first in your life. And he was very specific about this. And I always held this really true in my heart, God first. So when he said that, he said, so maybe you could actually say it's a bit heretical on his part, but he said, God first, not Jesus, God. And it always stuck with me. And so, and that, I believe, when I look back on it, that is, I believe, God telling me that this seed that was being planted would eventually one day start to sprout. Another, that was one of the first inklings that I had. I didn't know it at the time, but was one of my first inklings, and that actually kind of helped in my later years as I started to look at Islam, because I had that already in my heart.
You mentioned there was a time when you were in London, and this was your first sort of turning point. But can you think of any turning points before the London event?
Well, yes, and this is actually a turning away from the church. When the priest scandal first happened, the first go around, I was able to forgive. I was able to accept a lot of us who were involved in the church in different ways. Be it whatever ministry, whatever whatever you were doing, you had to start to take classes on pedophile, and it was very disturbing that we had to take this. It was mandatory. You had to take it was like go to class for like 4-6 hours on a Saturday, and protecting God's children, it was called, and I did it. But when I'm looking back, it's like, where are the priests? How come the priests aren't here with me? They're really the ones who need to be sitting in this class. I'm sorry, I'm being a little bit facetious, but and I actually asked that at the end, and I was told that they have a separate program, which is fine. The second go around, the second priest scandal, which was larger. This one hit. My wife and I had moved. My children had grown and were out of the house, and we were living now in South Carolina. And when this hit, it hit me hard, because now there were priests that I knew that were involved, priests that I personally knew, priests that married us, and I actually had to go and question, was our marriage valid? We got news back from the bishop that yes, it was. But you can see how what an impact that had, and I really started to. I hate to say it, but I just started to give up on religion, and I was angry, and it was like, how can this be allowed to happen? it's a kind of going down the atheist train of thought of, if there's a good God, how does a good God let bad things happen to innocent people, be it child molestation or just disease or whatever it is whatever bad thing it is, evil thing that you're thinking of. How does he allow these things to happen? And that's the path I was going down. And I have to say that I started to become agnostic. I did give up on my Catholic faith. I just couldn't stand it anymore. That there were men who were doing this, and they were being covered up and being protected, and when you give up on God, evil is the absence of God. And where there's an absence of God, bad things happen. And that's exactly what happened in my life. Without having that presence, I started doing bad things, harmful things, drinking way too much, smoking, just doing bad behavior. I got depressed, very depressed. I was traveling a lot, working a lot. We had moved to South Carolina. I had no friends here. I was very alone, and the traveling didn't help. And so it was during this time, I was in London, and it was after dinner. It was Friday night after work. Went out to dinner with a coworker, and he and I parted. And I was walking back to the hotel. It was near Piccadilly Circus. I think the viewers are familiar with that area. And there was a table, and it was what they call a dawa table, a prayer table, an information table, a literature table. And I saw it, and I knew they were Muslim. I could tell. A couple of the sisters there were in their outfits, and a couple of brothers with the kufis, with the hats. And I actually wanted to just walk by. didn't want to be bothered, and I actually started to pick up my pace to get by. But then I slowed down, and I thought to myself, you know what? You're not in a good spot. You've always been interested in Islam. You don't have any literature. You know nothing about it. But what harm could there be to go up and say hello and get some literature? And I actually really wanted to get a Quran. I was thinking, you know what? I would like to have a Quran. I'd like to see, especially if it's in English, I really would like to see this. And I walked up, and one of the brothers came up to me, and it was a cold night. It was dark, and I couldn't, unfortunately I couldn't recognize him today because we're all bundled up. But he came up to me, and he said, and I said, he said hello, and I said hello, and he said, are you interested in Islam? And I said, well, I really am interested in materials that you have, and to see what this is all about. I said, okay. And he said, are you a Christian? And I said, well, yes. He said, okay. And he goes, do you believe in the Trinity? And I remember I looked at him, and I thought, I'm not going to lie to this man. I'm going to just tell him the bare truth. And I just looked at him, and I said, no, I don't. And I kind of took him aback. I mean, I don't think he was expecting that answer. I just said, no, I don't. Because at that point in my life, I was done, right? I believed in God, and that's about it. And so I kind of got him off his track. And so he took a minute to kind of regroup. And then he said, do you believe that Jesus is God? And I looked at him again, and I said, I do not. I said, do you believe Jesus is the Son of God? And now that kind of made me pause, because this is something, I grew up with. And I said, well, I think I do. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll believe that he's the Son of God, even though I had reservations. I mean, I've always had reservations about this whole concept of being a sonship. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I always had reservations about it and questions about it. And it wasn't, but to him, I said yes. Because again, I just wanted to be truthful with him. I didn't want to start anything off on the wrong foot. So I just said yes. Okay. He said, have you ever read the Quran? And I said, no, I have not. I would like one. He goes, okay. He picked up one. It was a smaller, it was a full version, but it was a small, like a 4-inch by, it was a Sahid International, I think was the publisher. And he gave it to me, and he gave me some other literature, some brochures and things. And he goes, you promised me that you'll read this. And I said, oh yeah, I'm going to read it. He goes, okay. And then he looked at me, and I again, this is a perfect stranger. Didn't know him from Adam. And he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, promise me, when you go back to your home, he didn't know it was an hotel, you go back to your home tonight, that you will pray openly and sincerely to God. And so, I mean, it still makes me emotional. I still get caught up, and this has been almost 2.5 years ago. Still get caught up in it. It knocked. I'm lucky that I just didn't fall over, because it hit me. It hit me right in the heart. So I said to him, I will. I promise you I will. Went back to the hotel. I threw everything on the bed and fell down on my knees, and I started to pray. And it was heartfelt. And I just started to sob. And I said, God, I am completely lost, completely alone. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really going down a bad street. I need your help. Please help me.
Okay, that's an amazing story, Grant. So, I want to ask you about that time where you were in London. You were walking past this Islamic literature table with all the Quran and Islamic material there. But before that happened, had you had any thoughts about Islam, or was this the defining moment?
This was the defining moment. No, I had not considered it at all before.
And so can you just try and tell me how you were feeling at that moment? So you walked past it, you had a decision to make, and you decided to turn. What were you going through then? Tell me more about that.
Yes. So when I first walked by it, like I mentioned, I just wanted to get by it. I didn't want to I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want anybody to badger me. I just wanted to get by and get to my hotel. But then I stopped. And part of the reason I stopped was because I knew in my heart that I was not in a good spot. I knew that I needed to give God a chance. And Islam was something that was so foreign, so alien, so something that I knew nothing about. I thought to myself, what does it hurt to give them an ear, to give them a listen? I mean, at the worst case, I maybe waste 10 minutes of my life. Surely there's got to be something of worth here. These guys wouldn't be out here in the cold if there wasn't. And so, and I thought, I'm going to give them a listen. I'm going to give them a try. Give Islam a try. Not them. I meant Islam, but I was going to give them a try. And that was it. It was really at the moment, at the spot, I listened to whatever it was going on inside of me.
And so what were you expecting?
Well, when I first went up, I thought, okay, so, I've dealt with evangelical Christians all my life, especially, as a Catholic. We were particularly favorite targets of evangelicals, coming up, knocking on your door, and, and I'm sorry to say this, I really am this, please don't anyone, I hope none of the listeners take offense, but, coming up to your door, telling, Catholics are no good and whatnot. It's like, I was used to that. And so I kind of went at first I thought, okay, if they start to get into this evangelical mode, I'm going to walk away, because I just wasn't going to put up with it. But they didn't. In fact, it was just the opposite, right? It was, they didn't, I approached them, and as I was approaching, they came to me, right? So it was like, had I not made that initial step, they would let me walk right on by. And so that was first. My first thing is like, these guys are coming up and treating me with, approaching me with respect. And the second was the demeanor of the gentleman who was there. Not forceful, not trying to sell me anything. He actually wanted to know what I was doing, what I was looking for. And again, that was very refreshing. And I mean, I did at that point, I wanted to read the Quran. I felt I would really like a copy of the Quran in English because I've heard about it and I don't know anything about it. And I would like to see what this testament is all about. And so those were what was going on in my head as I approached the table.
Thanks, Grant. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, like the one thing that this gentleman was, he opened up the Quran and he pointed. I thought this was interesting. Now, looking back, then I didn't understand this at all. But he opened to the back of the Quran and he pointed to the prayer of the Ikhlas, the prayer of purity, the chapter of purity. It's one of the shorter chapters towards the end of the Quran, and he pointed to it. Then he made a tab. He pushed the paper down, and he said, "Start here." I was like, okay. I was like, well, start at the back of the book. That's fine. But he had a reason for it, as I later come to learn. That's actually a very extremely powerful prayer. And so the more I look, the more I see things were happening for reasons, even though at the time I had no idea what he was doing. No idea at all. And so, that was just a little interesting nugget.
Yeah, that brings a smile to my face. That's really nice. And it's so true, isn't it, that if you start at the back, it's probably, it's going to be more beneficial than trying to start from the start. Anything else you want to add about that encounter?
I think I pretty much covered it. It did lead me back to the hotel where I just opened up my heart. I really did. Just the prayer was so. I prayed sincerely, like I promised I would. And what's interesting was how that prayer has been answered. And if I can go ahead and continue. I came back to Charleston, and as soon as I get back the next day, my wife took us to a dog meetup. And so it was other, people who own different dogs, and we own pugs. And so, but during this meetup, this fellow, out of the blue, just out of the blue, came up and he was, started talking to me. And he said, "You look like a runner." I said, "Oh, no, I'm no runner." And he laughed and he goes, "But you look like one." And I said, "Well, thank you." And he said, "Would you like to come to a running group that I'm in?" I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah. We meet early Sunday mornings, and we go running about 4 or 5 miles, and about 20 so men, and love to have you." And that's when I remembered my prayer, and this was God answering. And I said, "I would. When do you meet? Where do you meet?" And he gave me the details. And sure enough, I went there and I met these people, very nice. And what's was really nice about them was it was a non-denominational group and all faiths included. So it wasn't just a Catholic group or a Protestant group, or it was open to everyone. Met a wonderful group of men. And so at my first prayer, of being alone and not having friends, immediately answered. Since I came home, I started reading the materials that I was given. I started to read the Quran. I started reading some of the pamphlets. One of them was My Great Love for Jesus Brought Me to Islam. That was a very good pamphlet. Although I will say that I think for somebody, I think it's good, but it might not be one of the first things you want to read. I think it's one of the things as you go down the road a bit, then you pick it up. Because when I first read it, it was a bit too much, and I wasn't ready for it then. And so, and I'm saying this because I'm thinking about listeners who may be like I was when I first started thinking about Islam, that, you have a very strong feelings about Christianity and about Jesus. Peace and blessings be upon him. And so when I know for me, it was quite a learning experience, quite a learning process to accept Islam and not feel that somehow I was betraying Jesus in some way. So, but and that in itself is a huge topic all in and of itself. Just we would talk probably for hours on that. But I started to read. But being in this running group, I started to make some friends. I started to fight my depression. I started to realize that I am drinking way too much, and I started realizing, oh my goodness, I'm doing some things which are completely inappropriate, and I started to make small corrections. I started to feel that my faith was returning slowly. I got involved, but I decided that, you know what, I'm going to go slow, and I am going to analyze everything. I'm going to open up my eyes. When you're involved, and I'm going to say this with all due respect, when you're involved in any form of religion, there's a suspension of disbelief that happens. And this is not, when I say this, I am not meaning it in a negative way. But what I mean is, like, when I was a Catholic, I was a Catholic. I just followed what the church said to do, never questioned. I just accepted. And that's suspending my disbelief. And so I decided this time that I wasn't going to go down that road, that I was actually going to be more critical. I was actually going to critically think about what was being taught. And so by making this mental decision, I approached Christianity in a new way. And I was also saying to myself, I am going to be open to Islam and Judaism, as well as Protestantism. And so I started to look at these faiths under a critical eye. So I started to look at the faiths under a critical eye. I started to attend Bible study. I went to an evangelical Bible study. I went to a Catholic Bible study. Judaism I did probably cross off first, not through any real fault. I just didn't feel it was a fit for me. And so I determined that it was going to be between Islam and Christianity. As my faith started returning, I started to feel my Islamic faith growing. And Christianity, though, I started to struggle with. And one of the things that I came across, especially in the New Testament, was I came across the concept that the New Testament was written in stages, and each stage brought with it a new theological element, meaning that when we look at the New Testament, we look at when they were written. And so I always assumed they were written at the same time, but that's not true. Paul's letters were the first to be written. These are historical facts, but please, anyone can just look them up. I'm going to be very generalized, and they were written about 20 years after Christ. And his theological view was that after Jesus had ascended to heaven is when he became special, the special anointed one of God. When we look at Mark, which was pretty much the oldest gospel, and again, these weren't written by these disciples. Another thing I found was it's the gospel according to Mark. So it was written by other people that we don't know. But for Mark, Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, was infused with God, became divine at his baptism. When we look at Matthew and Mark, this now said that Jesus was infused with God, became divine with God at his birth. And finally, with John, which was the last and latest gospel, John says that Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, was with God from the beginning. And so we had these four different concepts of who Jesus was. And I started to realize this is nothing new, that Christianity struggled with defining who was Jesus, what was Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. And we find the different councils of, that happened in the early church years, of trying to define, was he dual natured, was he part of a trinity, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I also started seeing discrepancies, for example, like with how did Judas die? He died, was he hung, or was he, did he fall in a field and split apart? Found discrepancies with, both in the Old Testament as well as in the New. And so not that these hindered my faith, but I started to look at this in a new light. I started to look at it like, okay, there are certainly truths in the Bible, and it's certainly, you will find direction and revelation through it. But also I started to realize that man was involved, that man started to try to harmonize things, or, trying to write, where, like, for example, human sacrifice is condemned in the Old Testament, and how does the Bible handle Jesus' crucifixion then if human sacrifice is condemned? So things like that were starting to become clear to me. And then on the other side, my studies in Islam and the Quran started actually got more and more solid. It went from all of the things that I was misinformed about, and I got to the point where it's like, okay, everything I thought I knew about Islam was wrong. Everything about the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, were wrong. Everything about the religion was wrong. And so I started to, intensely look for valid, authentic sources, and I was given a whole multitude of it. I was blown away. Like when you look at the Quran, it was not a book. It was not a written book. It was a recited scripture that was memorized. It's been unaltered for over 1,400 years. That in itself alone is a miracle. We have a text in Japan. Japanese have a text, the seven rings, which are written by a samurai, which is probably one of the best kept texts. It has been altered 7 or 8 times. The Quran is a miracle in itself, in that it has been unaltered, and every word, every letter, unchanged, memorized by millions of people. And then there's proofs. We have the Birmingham, the Quran, which was carbon dated back to the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So we have these, and then how could this have been written by a man who was illiterate? It's impossible. It had to be what it was, which is the literal words of God, and it was a miracle of the Quran. It's logical, it's direct, it is in keeping with modern day philosophy, so that you can actually get up and argue things. It keeps with science. The Quran knew about orbits of the planets orbit about the sun. We're only now learning about these things. The Quran knew. How could Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, know this 1,400 years ago in the deserts of Arabia, and being illiterate? It's just impossible.
You mentioned the discrepancies that you found in the Bible. Can you give our listeners any tips on how to go about researching this? So, I mean, many of our listeners are going to, for sure, have doubts about what's happening, what you've mentioned. But can you give them some good tips on how to actually find some good sources and what to do about researching this?
Yes, I will. Number one, stay away from podcasts with so-called experts. I saw a podcast where actually was the brother who was on your show. He was invited to a Christian evangelical podcast, and shame on them for how they treated him. Congratulations to him. He held his head high and was a man of just honor, and he he just was so good. And they, the people who invited him, were horrible to him. And for me, when I heard that podcast, and I'll keep the names out, but I'm sure some of your listeners will know, but that really was like, okay, I have to look at. So for the listeners, find professors in universities, go to schools of seminary, go to real, honest men and women who have done a lot of study and research into these things. And when you hear it, keep an open mind. Remember, you want a professor who is not, if they have some type of agenda, stay away. But if they're going to give you knowledge, like if they're going to teach you things that are historically accurate, and they don't throw their points of view in it, then listen. So try to, so for my listeners, and again, when I say these things, these are facts, but they don't mean that I'm not degrading. I am not, because the Bible is still divinely inspired, and you can find wonderful things in there, as we have millions and millions and millions of Christians who do, as well as Jews with the Old Testament. So in the Torah. So I'm not saying these things that to degrade, but I am saying them because for me, I wanted to show a comparison of human involvement, man's involvement in the keeping of the scriptures versus how the Quran has been kept over the years.
Okay, and you also mentioned that at that time you started your, some research into Islam. So can you give our listeners some tips on the best way to do this? Yes.
Again, you'll stay away from podcasts where you have people who are find legitimate scholars, and if you can't seem to find it, it's easy enough to find people who are accredited. Look for real universities. So if it says Dave Smith's college in the woods, don't look for things that have real names. Top 10 Ivy League schools, top 10 schools, Penn State. Look for the named value, and for professors who are from those schools and from those seminaries, North Carolina University, etc., and seminaries. In fact, I for Islam, I really did, because I knew that there was a lot of falsity going around, a lot of inaccurate things. I was indoctrinated with a lot of those things, and so I really wanted. And so I looked for accredited scholars. And those are the ones and you can tell by the way they talk. They're the ones who give rational arguments, and then also are open to. They'll also give you other points of view. Those are the ones I think that are most valid. People who will give you different points of view, saying that just it's not my way or the highway. This is how this is taught. Here's a point of view from there. So for those who are listening, those who are looking, those who are searching, look for those things and also give it up to God and say, God, help me find. And he will. God will provide. He will guide you if you ask him with sincerity of heart.
And also at the same time, when this was happening, you're doing your research, you mentioned that you felt a returning of faith and you felt your faith in Islam growing. So can you tell me how did that feel when you started to realize that you were getting interested in Islam?
It was scary. It was scary. When you live your almost entire adult life in one school, in one denomination, to throw over the apple cart and start something completely new, it's quite terrifying. I really didn't want these feelings, but I couldn't stop them. I also knew the truth when I saw it. And I actually, there was actually a lot of times when I said to myself, okay, I can close my eyes, cover my ears, and just go back. But I knew that I could not see the truth and not act on it. And that's what Islam was presenting me. It was presenting me truth and truths. And I think that one of the things that, because I really was at a roadblock. I mean, when you're a Christian, Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And that's a very defining, mutually exclusive event that, is hard to break. You, as a Christian, there is no other way. It is Jesus. And, and Jesus said to Thomas, blessed are those who have not seen but believe. Again, that hits you in the heart. And finally, the real struggle is the crucifixion and Jesus' sacrifice and the feelings of betrayal that if I go to Islam, I'm betraying Jesus' sacrifice. And how do you reconcile these things? And so that was a huge fear as I felt myself being pulled to the truth of Islam. How was I going to give these things up? And I knew that it wasn't something I was going to find in a book or in reading or through lectures and so I called the Imam, our religious leader, our spiritual leader here in Charleston at the Central Mosque of Charleston, and I started to talk to him, and he told me about the 5 pillars of Islamic faith, about saying the Shahada, for professing in one God and believing that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the messenger, prophet of God. Good with the first part, wasn't so sure about the second part. Talked about praying 5 times a day. Well, you know what? We had the prayers of the hours, so I wasn't really practicing prayers of the hours. I knew about, Catholicism has it, so not so alien. Fasting. Okay, well, Catholics fast. So not actually, we don't fast like the Muslims fast, but we still fasted. Didn't really, paying charity. Catholics pay charity, no problem there. And finally, the Hajj. Again, it was like taking a trip to St. Peter's. So I was good with just about all of these, with the pillars. Talked about the articles of faith. Again, I was there. But then I said to him, okay, I then expressed my concerns about Jesus and peace and blessings be upon him. And the Imam said something to me that we still talk about to this day. And he said, you know enough about Jesus, now you need to learn about Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon both of them. And it was just like, and he had the finger. He said, now you need to learn about the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And it's like, you're right. That's where I'm lacking. I don't know anything about him. And so he gave me some, and I really did start to dive into the Prophet. And, like I said before, everything I thought I knew was wrong. And I recognized the rigorous academic authentications that go into everything about his life. We know everything about his life. We know from the time he was born till the time he died. We know what he said, where he was, what he did. Can't say that for the prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him. We know the 3 years of Jesus' life according to the gospel writers, according to Paul's letters, but we don't know, we don't really know what happened before. And we know that the prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was active for 22 years, I believe, 22 or 23 years, in which time he suffered persecution, ridicule, starvation, but he kept true to his message, to the message that was given to him. He never faltered. He was called the trustworthy, the sincere, the honest. And, for me, the more I learned about him, I started to appreciate him. Then I started to admire him. And then I started to love him. And I started to believe that he certainly was, like stated, a mercy that was sent to mankind. And I realized then he just was always not, he was insisting, I am just a man, I am the messenger. And you look at his life and you just cannot help but admire and appreciate. And then when you learn the details, you just love him for what he did and what he sacrificed himself for. And I felt really close to him growing up in foster care like I did. I felt for him because he was an orphan, and things I just really connected. And when that started, I realized, okay, I'm all in for the Shahada. And then I think when I came to that realization that the Shahada is going to happen, then the Shahada, of course, is the declaration of faith, that you believe in one God, and you believe that Muhammad and all of the prophets are his messengers. And that includes Jesus and Noah and Abraham, peace and blessings be on all of them. And so I knew at that point, okay, this is going to happen. Now I just need to start to dot the I's and cross the T's to make sure, because for me, the moment now as a Catholic, the moment that you do something like this, it's very serious. It's called late sententiae, which means excommunication. The moment that I say my Shahada is I'm excommunicated from the Catholic Church. I don't need any priest or anybody to say it to me. It happens the moment that I do. And so I knew the seriousness of this, and I knew that this was an all or nothing. There was no going back. When I spoke to the Imam, the spiritual leader, I don't know if he was really familiar with excommunication and what, but because he was going, are you sure? Are you certain? And I said, there's no going back for me. When I do this, it's all or nothing. I'm jumping in the deep end. I can't get out. And so prior to that, I had to be fully committed to this. And so I did need a little bit more time. I said to him, I just need a little bit more time to just go over some of the lingering questions that I had. And the lingering questions was about the prophet Jesus. And, his commandments were love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And what does Islam teach? Prophet Jesus said, love your brother, love your neighbor as yourself, the golden rule. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be on both of them, said, you can't be truly called a believer until you love your brother. And I think I messed that up a little bit, but it was same concept. Jesus gave us the Lord's Prayer. And when you look at Fatiha, the opening prayer of the Quran, and what Muslims start all prayers with, it's very similar to the Lord's Prayer. Different, but Yeah, overall similar. And I started to realize how compatible the religions were. And when we looked at and I really came to the fact that, you know, I really, the last bit of struggle was the crucifixion. And when I read in the Quran that the Quran said that, you know, that the crucifixion was that Jesus was not killed, it made it seem like it. And I struggled with that. But, you know, coming up to this point, I was like, you know, everything in the Quran that I've read has worked itself out. Everything that I stumbled on has worked itself out. I've realized the truth to it, even though maybe at first when I heard it, I said, no, this can't be true. It eventually did. I eventually figured it out. And I said, you know what, I'm going to figure this out too. And so I took that leap of faith, and I went to the Imam, and I said, I'm ready. And that was on July 10th of 2021. And I took my Shahada with him shortly after at the Eid. I took my public Shahada. And I got to tell you, since that day, my life has just been getting better and better every single day. I stopped drinking, don't smoke, don't do bad behaviors, etc.
Okay, that's amazing. I really like that, the way that you introduced to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and how you came to love the story, and it happens to everyone who accepts Islam. We'll talk about your day of conversion, but before we talk about that, I want to go back to that moment, how you introduced the Imam. You decided to go and visit the Imam. How long was it between when you converted and you first talked to the Imam?
So I spoke. It was about my communications with him before my Shahada were about 4 months, and my very first visit to him, I knew I needed to visit. I knew I had to get some spiritual guidance and direction from a scholar. I knew it. I think I kind of read as much as I was going to be able to read and figure out by myself. And so I looked up where the Central Mosque of Charleston was. And of course, the Google Maps gave me the wrong location. And so I wanted to actually go down on Friday and kind of experience a Jummah prayer. And it did say open invitations. Everyone's allowed to come. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to come down. I want to listen to the service, listen to the prayer. And of course, Google gave me the wrong location. So I can't, there's just an empty building. And I'm like, what? I drove around the block. Drove by it again. It's like, there's nobody here. I don't see Central Mosque of Charleston anywhere. I go, what the heck? I go one more time around the block. Drove by it again. And, this is down, near downtown. So there's not a whole lot of parking and on. I was like, I can't believe it. I go, this isn't it. I said, well, maybe today's not the day. Maybe I'm going to have to rethink this. And I actually was about ready to just turn around and go home. I was a one-way street, so I had to go down. And sure enough, 2 blocks down on the left-hand side, there's a Central Mosque. The Friday prayer had just let out. I saw a bunch of people coming out. I go, there it is. And so I found a place to park, and I walked up. Now I got to say, I was very nervous. I didn't know what to expect. Being Caucasian, I felt, I was like, oh my, I hope people don't get worried about me. I don't want to come off as like, somebody looking like they're aggressive. I was just nervous all around. And I walked in and I got inside the door, and, having been raised with an Asian family, and been studying in Japan and China, I knew, you just take your shoes off automatically when you walk in the house. I mean, it's just like second nature. So I kicked my shoes off, saw the place. So just put my shoes up there, and I started looking at the usher, like the main greeter, and he was looking at me. And he said, can I help you? And I go, well, I would like to speak to the Imam if he's available. I said, I know I'm late. I'm sorry I missed the service. I couldn't find the place. And he said, oh, no worries. He said, are you a Muslim? And I said, no, not yet. I said, not yet, because I kind of knew the inevitable was going to happen. But I said, no, not yet. And he smiled, and he said, are you here to take your Shahada? And I said, no, not yet either. And he said, okay, come with me. So he took me in the back, and we met with the Imam. And I really, he when he saw me, he gave me the peace. He said, "Peace, Assalamu alaikum." I didn't know what to respond, and I said, "Peace be with you." And he smiled and he put his hand on his heart. He said, "Peace be with you." And he said, "How can I help you?" And I said, I'm searching for the truth. I said, "I've got so many questions. I don't know where to go, and I'm hoping that you can help me." He said, Of course." He took me in his office. He started talking a little bit. He gave me a bunch of literature, scheduled another meeting for the next Friday, very welcoming, very open. And so I came down the next, and so that's how it started. But I do have to say my very first initial, it did take a lot of guts. I was nervous to go. And I there were a couple Fridays. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I bailed. I came up with some excuse. Oh, I got a work meeting. It's too close. I'm not feeling too good today. Or a couple of weeks, I kind of bailed, but I eventually did get the courage, and I went down. I'm so happy I did. So welcoming. So the people there were so welcoming, so happy. It was one of the gentlemen said to me, he said, "I am so happy to see you here." It's like, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Happy to see you too. So very good experience all around.
That's awesome, Grant. And I like how you used the word that you felt it was inevitable that you were going to be a Muslim. So I can see three points here. You've got the point where you feel that it's inevitable. And then the second point is it's before the day of conversion, but you feel like you're convinced and you feel like, okay, I can accept Islam. I feel like possibly I'm a Muslim now. And then the third point is the day of conversion. So can you remember that time when you felt that was when it was the first time you felt it was inevitable that, I'm most likely going to become a Muslim?
Yes. So after my talk, it was just before I made the decision to go and meet with the spiritual leader. I just knew I couldn't turn away from the truth. And the booklet, My Great Love of Jesus Led Me to Islam, at the end, the author states, now that you've been presented with these things, if you feel in your heart that you're being guided to Islam, you need to act on it. And those were very true words. And I caution the listener to maybe not take that book right away, but wait until you've done more investigating, because there are a lot of hard truths in that book that might be a little bit off-putting at first. And they were for me. And it took me quite a while to work through those feelings, but ultimately you will. But what I'm going to say is that my heart was telling me that this is the truth. There's no mystery about it. With the Christian Trinity and with Jesus being divine, there's really no way that you can logically prove these things. That's why it's called the mystery of faith. It boils down to being the mystery of faith. I know there are a lot of people who, with a lot of great intentions, who try to prove theologically that these are they make their cases, but it always ends up boiling down to a leap of faith and accepting the mystery. That's what it boils down to, and that's fine for a lot of people. That's that's what it is. It's a mystery of faith, and that's what you accept. But for me, because I had made a conscious change to be more critical, to unsuspend my disbelief, and I really wanted to feel that my decision was going to be based on logic and on reason. I couldn't deny the logic and reason that I was being presented with Islam. Everything about it was logical. And again, to think, how could an illiterate man in the deserts of Arabia possibly know all of these things? It just said to me that, well, if you were looking at a miracle, the miracle of the Quran is right there, present day, in your hands, miracle. The miracles of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, are documented in the Bible. He cured the leper. He raised the dead. He did these things through God's power and God working through him. But with the Prophet Muhammad, we have miracles too. Don't get me wrong, but we have a miracle that you can put in your hands today, and that's the miracle of the Quran. So I knew, that's why I knew when these things started to come to light, I knew that I was going to become a Muslim. My wife, interestingly enough, so I had a couple still religious questions that I had to get. And I also, my wife, she, like me, became very agnostic after the pre-scandal. She realized, and she said to me when I told her that I'm thinking of converting to Islam, she said, "I had a feeling you were." And I said, "How did you know that?" And she said, "Because you were reading the Quran all the time." and so, I said, "Okay." I said, "Are you all right if I do this?" And she said, "Well, it's your decision." She said, "I'm okay, but don't expect me to follow you." And we'll talk about that in a minute. It was hard for me to accept that, but I also realized that religion starts in your own heart. And while I could have kept it a secret, I didn't really want to. I wanted to let it be known. Now, I don't think you need to be in everybody's face about it. For example, like my friends and whatnot, I don't need to be out there saying, "Hey, as a Muslim." And I think, because I grew up, I'm, nearly 60 years old. And so back in my day, you don't talk about politics. You don't talk about religion. Those are things that you just kept personal. And nowadays, everybody talks about politics, it seems. But, and so so to get back to the question at hand, when I realized that, yes, this was going to happen, that I needed to just wrap up a couple things, which one was talking to my wife about it. One was to answer a couple last couple questions.
And so let's talk about your day of conversion now. But one small question before that is, so of course, you've decided to convert and you've organized to go to the mosque and do your conversion. But can you remember that time in the weeks preceding that where you actually decided, yes, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to proceed with Islam. And when you actually thought you were a Muslim, can you remember that time?
I do. And alhamdulillah, thank you. Praise be to God for you reminding me about this, because there was, yes. So I was out for a run. Now a good friend of mine, my buddy, who was my son's godfather, I worked with him. I knew him for years. He passed away during COVID. And it was a horrible death. He was locked away in a hospital. No one could visit him. He was within strangers, and he died. And I was just so emotionally distraught about it. And I remember I was praying to God for him, and I remember I was out for a run. And I actually stopped in the middle of my run. And I was listening to the podcast, believe it or not. But I just stopped, and I took out my earphones, and I said, "God, if I'm to become a Muslim, I need a sign." I said, "I need you to show me and talk to me and tell me that this is right." And I was looking up in the sun, and I just felt a peace come over me, a real peace. And I felt so good. And the next day, I went to the evangelical Bible study. And they were in John. And the verse they read was John 16. I don't remember exactly, but it was talking about Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, having the Holy Spirit in their presence. And this verse, when you hear it, the Greek is paraklikos, whatever. Some people say, oh, that was a mistranslation of the word for the Prophet Muhammad, his name. I don't know. It was really the sentences after that hit me like somebody punched me in the face. The word, it went, he will recite what he hears, and he will prophesize truths, and he will show the correct path and way. And I'm like, well, if they're not talking about, if Jesus isn't talking about Prophet Muhammad, I don't know what he's talking about. It was so clear. And but peace and blessings be on both of them. And then as the Bible study went on, I mean, it was after the resurrection, and Jesus made his first appearance to the disciples. And Jesus walked into the room again. This is in John, I think it's John 22, somewhere. And Jesus said, "Peace be upon you. Those whose sins you forgive are forgiven, and those whose sins you hold are withheld." And I thought about that. And I mean, it was kind of like one of those moments, like in a movie when you watch The Matrix, how time freezes. I actually had that bit of a time freeze moment where everybody stopped talking, and that verse just resonated in my mind. And my thought was, Jesus just came off the cross. He just was resurrected. He just walked into the disciples' room. And the first words he says are not, "Hey guys, I just sacrificed myself. Well, all the world's sins are forgiven." No, he gives them power to hold sins against others, which, by the way, is today used in churches and Catholics. They use this power. And I'm thinking, no, this isn't right. And then that's when it hit me. And I stopped my thoughts, and I just looked up, and actually in the prayer with my palms up, and I just said, "Thank you, God," because I knew he was speaking to me, and I knew that it wasn't necessarily those verses. He showed me, and that was the definitive moment. That's when I knew. There's no okay. I'm done. I'm becoming Muslim, and so thank you for reminding me about that.
You're welcome, Grant. That's I really enjoyed that. So, and I liked the part where you talked about how you looked up at the sun, and then you felt this sense of peace come across you, and it gave me goosebumps because the same sort of thing happened to me. But it was the opposite. I looked at the moon, and I'm sure it was probably a full moon, and I'm standing in the middle of this park in the middle of the night, and needing something and searching for something and talking to God and staring at this moon, which was bright. And I'll never forget that moment. And I think it's like one of those turning points where you just, start to really deeply contemplate about the whole purpose of everything.
SubhanAllah. Praise be to God. Yes. And it's when you accept, and God's love just pours into you. And then you're overcome with a feeling of peace and tranquility. And there's just no better feeling in the world. Yeah.
And it comes at just the right time too, because this is all the problems in our life before that. We were looking for peace, but then we weren't looking really in the right place. And then when we turned to God, and then suddenly it came, it's just an amazing thing.
Yeah. And I was like you, I was looking for happiness and peace in the liquor bottle, with doing lots of things that just were not giving me happiness. Yeah. And like I said before, since becoming a Muslim, my life has improved 150%. And so then I went down. I spoke with my imam, my spiritual leader here, and we went over the 5 pillars of faith, which for people who don't know, and please correct me if I get any of this wrong, but it's you say your shahada, you say your profession of faith, which is now believing in one God, absolutely, and that Muhammad is the seal of all prophets and his messenger, and no doubts, absolutely, yes, agreed. So I was ready. 5 times prayer, 5 times a day, going to do it. Paying the zakat, paying the charity, done. Fasting, going to do it. And if I can, make a pilgrimage to the Hajj, if I can. If you're capable of doing it, then to do it. And so, and we did my shahada right there and then with him. And it was a wonderful feeling. I But that was not my public one. It was my first, my private one. And I'm glad I did it privately with him. And so, and we hugged, and I got a little teary-eyed, and felt this great wave of happiness. And he said to me that all of my past sins are forgiven. All of us in our lives have done things that are not good, some worse than others. It's all relative. And I said, even what are called mortal sins. And he said, even the bad ones are all forgiven. And I said, hey, Mom, I got to tell you something. I said, and I'm not, but I said, I've never been able to forgive my parents. They abandoned me. And I said, I've never been able to forgive them. And I go, it's hard for me to listen to sermons and whatnot when people say, honor your father and mother. I just can't do it. And I go, I'm a 50-something-year-old man. And I said, I could never have abandoned my children. I don't know how they could have done this. And he said, gosh, talk about wisdom. He said something to me that he goes, if your parents hadn't done what they did, odds are you would never have become a Muslim. I was just dumbfounded. And he said, so instead of having anger, thank them for what they did. And alhamdulillah, praise be to God, my eyes were so open. It's like, you're absolutely right. My God, I've been thinking about this wrong all these years. Holy cow, it's like, thank you. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. You brought me to Islam. And my whole attitude's changed. That's why I'm saying, Islam is a religion of peace. It's a religion of love. I mean that wholeheartedly to anyone who's coming in and thinking, they hear about Fox News said jihadi this or jihadi that, and you turn the Fox News off, turn the news off, and learn the truth, and you will find that Islam is a religion of love. It's a religion of peace. It's a religion of harmony. It's about living together in happiness. About giving. It's submitting yourself. Being a Muslim is to submit yourself, submitting in peace, full-heartedly, giving yourself over to God and God's will. And if you do that honestly, openly, sincerely, there's no room for hatred. There's no room for anger. You just are filled with God's love and God's direction. And our Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, suffered all those years to give us authentic hadith, direction, guidance that we can fully have faith in and confidence in and to follow. And that he as a man was not this warmonger that these people make him out to be. He was just the opposite. I'm a martial artist, right? I trained 30 plus years in martial arts. Martial arts teaches you that there's no first strike in karate, that martial arts is all about defense. And that's Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings on him. He was all about that. It was defense only. He allowed these aggressors to write horrific treaties, just like the whites did to the Native Americans, right? These horrible, one-sided, lopsided treaties. He accepted it, and the fellow believers got upset with him, and he said, "Believe in God. God will guide us." And sure enough, God did. Just that absolute faith that he had in the guidance that he gave, and everything that you hear, just no matter what you hear, if it's negative, treat it with a grain of salt. Just treat it with a grain of salt. Somebody comes at, like this one. Anytime somebody says, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent now, but like anything, somebody says something that kind of gets your emotions going, realize that what they're doing is they're just trying to get you agitated. They're saying falsehoods that are geared to get you emotionally up there so that you'll say something that you'll regret. And so when they say things like, oh, he married a 9-year-old girl. Oh, what a terrible man. It's like, okay, stop. That's not at all factual. Number one, you look at it, the state of Delaware up until 1960, the legal age of marriage was 9 years old. There are things called contractual marriages that we've had since the beginning, basically, of time, where you can get contracted into a marriage at young ages. Doesn't mean doesn't mean that they are fulfilled. They're just contracts that are made. People back then married a lot younger. Sure, a girl needs to be a certain age at this day and age, but not back then. All of these factors need to be considered. And if it was such a scandal, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had so many enemies. Don't you think that they would have just jumped at the chance? This is like a gift. A gift. It would have been a gift if it was actually a scandal. It was a gift on a golden platter that they could have used. But no, it wasn't. That time, in that age, it's acceptable. There was nothing wrong. But you can make it, you can skew it in today's language, in today's modern lens, to actually look like a bad thing. And then, so that's why I was just saying, anything that you take things with a grain of salt, and kind of got way off on a tangent there, but I'm sorry that I did, but.
That's okay, Grant. So yeah, thanks for that information. And we're going to have to call it an end here. I've got so many more questions that I want to ask you about what it's like to be a Muslim, the changes in your life, your first encounters with Islam, the things you had to go through. I know it's only been 11 months. Some of the new commitments in your life, the consequences and so forth. We can talk about your wife and some other general questions, but I think we're going to have to leave that for another episode. So
Excellent.
We're going to invite you back. Hopefully you can join us.
Inshallah. And we can say, same bat time, same bat channel. And if you are too young to know what that means, you need to watch Batman. But sorry. Sorry.
So to close it off now, can you give our listeners your advice? So they're in the same shoes that you were in. You were listening to this podcast. You were thinking about becoming Muslim. What's your advice for them as a summary?
As a summary, as you are now, so I once was. As I am now, so you can and shall be. Listen to your heart. Listen to the truth. Find authentic sources and follow your heart and allow God to guide you. And if you openly and sincerely make a prayer for his guidance, God will guide you. And don't be scared. Allow this to happen, because in the end, I got to tell you, I am so much happier now. My life is so much improved. I cannot, yes, no one here knows me from a grain of salt. All I can say is that I'm being honest and open, and with you all the listeners, and to trust me in what I say is that you will not, this will not be a mistake. It will be a good decision the day you embrace Islam.
Thanks for that, Grant. And also thanks for coming on to the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and thank everyone for listening. It's greatly appreciated.
So this has been another episode of the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com. If you have any questions, you could submit those questions through our Contact Us page at the website, untoislam.com. We also have a Q&A session that you can join us if you need to talk to someone live. And there are also other articles on the website. So I leave you with the words of peace. May the peace and blessings of God be on you all. Assalamu alaikum.